The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Admiral Zeth Curry's claws scraped against the obsidian podium, the sound echoing through the vast crystalline dome that housed the most powerful beings in known space. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sectors, their varied forms creating a tapestry of alien diversity that had taken millennia to achieve. The Vorthic delegation, with their insectoid carapaces gleaming under the chamber's artificial suns, clicked their mandibles in anticipation. The ethereal luminari floated in their containment fields, their gaseous forms shimmering with barely contained energy. Even the ancient Chronari, whose stone-like bodies had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, leaned forward with interest. But today, all eyes were fixed on the empty chair marked with the simple designation, Terra, Human Federation. Esteemed colleagues, Admiral Zeth Curry began, her voice carrying the weight of authority that had commanded respect across a dozen star systems. We gather today to address the continued defiance of the species known as humans. For the past 3 standard cycles, they have ignored our ultimatums, dismissed our warnings, and most egregiously, refused to acknowledge the sovereignty of this council over their actions in the Kepler sector. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The Kepler sector had been a point of contention. For years, a region of space rich in quantum crystals and home to several primitive species that the council had deemed protected worlds. The humans, in their typical fashion, had established mining operations and research stations throughout the sector, claiming it was uninhabited and free for colonization. The time for diplomatic solutions has passed, continued the Admiral, her serpentine form coiling with barely restrained aggression. Intelligence reports indicate that the humans have constructed what they call a defensive installation in the heart of the sector. Our scouts describe it as a massive structure, unlike anything in our databases. They claim it's merely a research station, but we know better. Counselor Vex High of the Morphic Collective raised one of his forearms, the biomechanical appendage whirring softly. Admiral, with respect, the humans have proven resourceful in the past. The incident at Wolf 359, their rapid expansion through the Orion Arm, their peculiar ability to adapt to environments that would kill most species. Perhaps caution is warranted. The suggestion was met with a chorus of clicking, hissing, and electronic protests from across the chamber. The Zephyrians, proud warriors who had conquered dozens of systems through sheer military might, were particularly vocal in their disapproval. Caution, Admiral Zeth Curry's voice dripped with disdain. Counselor Vex High, the humans are a young species. They've barely mastered faster-than-light travel. Their technology is primitive by our standards, and their military consists of hastily assembled fleets using retrofitted civilian vessels. They number fewer than 20 billion across all their colonies. While this council represents over 3 trillion sentient beings, she gestured to the holographic display that materialized above the chamber, showing the current disposition of forces in the galaxy. Blue markers represented council fleets, scattered across thousands of systems in an intricate web of power and control. Red markers, pitifully few in comparison, marked human territories. The humans have had their chance to join the galactic community as junior partners. The Admiral continued. They've rejected every overture, every reasonable demand for compliance with established interstellar law. They've harbored fugitives, violated quarantine zones, and worst of all, they've begun spreading their chaotic influence to other species. This last point struck a nerve. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The human problem wasn't just about territorial disputes, it was about ideology. Humans had a disturbing tendency to inspire rebellion in species that had been perfectly content under council guidance for centuries. The Altarians had begun demanding representation in council decisions. The Centauri colonies had started questioning tribute requirements. Even some of the younger Vorthic had begun expressing what they called human-like ideas about individual freedom and self-determination. The solution is simple, Admiral Zeth Curry announced, her voice cutting through the chamber's nervous energy. We deploy the 7th Fleet to the Kepler sector. One demonstration of our power, one calculated strike against their installation, and the humans will understand their place in the galactic order. The holographic display shifted to show the 7th Fleet in all its terrible glory. 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of Council engineering, capable of glassing entire planets or reducing space stations to their component atoms. The flagship alone, the inexorable truth, was 3 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that could crack a moon in half. I must register the Terran hegemony's concerns. A new voice spoke from the observer's gallery. The speaker was human Ambassador Elena Vasquez, whose presence had been tolerated rather than welcomed. She was a small woman by human standards, unremarkable in appearance compared to the exotic beings surrounding her. But her voice carried a clarity that somehow filled the vast chamber. Ambassador Vasquez, Admiral Zeph Curry acknowledged with barely concealed irritation. You have been granted observer status out of courtesy, but this council has already voted. Your people have forfeited their right to participate in these proceedings through their continued defiance. Then I'll make this brief, Elena replied, standing slowly. The installation in the Kepler sector is indeed a research station, as we've stated. But I want to be absolutely clear about one thing: it's not just studying quantum crystals or alien artifacts, it's studying us. What makes humans human? What makes us survive when we shouldn't? Fight when we can't win, and find hope in the darkest moments. She paused, letting her words sink in. We've learned things about our own species that even we didn't know. Things that might surprise you. The chamber erupted in what could generously be called laughter. A cacophony of alien sounds expressing amusement, derision, and disbelief. The Zephyrians produced a sound like grinding metal, while the Luminari-esque gaseous forms pulsed with colors that conveyed mockery. Ambassador, Admiral Zeph Curry said when the noise subsided. We have complete psychological profiles of your species. We know your capabilities, your limitations, your predictable responses to various stimuli. Your primates with delusions of grandeur, slightly more advanced than when you were throwing rocks at each other on your homeworld. You're right about one thing, Elena said quietly. We are still the same species that threw rocks. We just got better at choosing our targets. The Admiral dismissed the comment with a wave of her claw. Your warning is noted and ignored, Ambassador. The 7th Fleet departs in 6 standard hours. I suggest you use that time to contact your superiors and convince them to surrender the Kepler installation voluntarily. It would save considerable loss of life. As the council session concluded and the various species began filing out of the chamber, Elena remained standing in the observer's gallery. She activated a small communicator, speaking in the rapid, efficient tones that had become humanity's signature in diplomatic channels. Control, this is Ambassador Vasquez. They're sending the 7th Fleet. 200 ships. Flagship is the inexorable truth. Edit to Kepler is approximately 48 hours given their standard formation speed. She paused, watching the last of the council members leave. Yes, I delivered the warning as instructed. They laughed, as expected. Another pause, longer this time. Understood. Initiate Protocol 7. And Control, tell the research team that their theories are about to be tested under combat conditions. All of them. As Elena left the chamber, she passed through the corridors of the council station, observing the casual confidence of the various species around her. Security guards from a dozen different worlds stood at attention, their various forms of armor and weapons representing the peak of galactic military technology. Civilian administrators moved with the unhurried efficiency of beings who had never known defeat, never faced a threat that couldn't be negotiated with or overwhelmed through superior force. They had no idea what they were about to face. In the depths of space, 47 light-years away, the Kepler research station hung in the void like a geometric flower made of metal and crystal. To casual observation, it appeared to be exactly what the humans claimed: a scientific installation studying the unique properties of the sector's quantum crystal formations. Its 6 petals extended outward from a central hub, each one bristling with sensor rays, communication dishes, and what appeared to be mining equipment. But appearances, as the council was about to learn, could be deceiving. Deep within the station's core, Dr. Sarah Chen reviewed the data that had been accumulating. For the past 3 years, the research project had begun as a simple question. Why did humans consistently outperform galactic projections in every conflict they'd participated in? The answer, it turned out, was far more complex and terrifying than anyone had imagined. The neurological scans are conclusive, she reported to the assembled team of scientists and military advisors. When humans face extinction-level threats, our brains undergo a fundamental reorganization. Survival instincts don't just sharpen, they evolve in real time. Pattern recognition increases by orders of magnitude. Strategic thinking becomes hyper-focused. And most importantly, our pain inhibitors don't just activate, they completely rewrite our tolerance for acceptable losses. General Marcus Webb, the station's military commander, studied the data with grim satisfaction. So we literally become a different species when we're cornered. Not different, Dr. Chen corrected. We become what we've always been, underneath all the civilization and social conditioning. We become the apex predator that climbed to the top of Earth's food chain by being more ruthless, more adaptable, and more absolutely relentless than anything else on the planet. The implications were staggering. Every human conflict in galactic history had been a learning experience, each battle adding to a collective understanding of human potential under extreme stress. The data suggested that humanity's true capabilities had never been fully unleashed because they'd never faced a threat that required it. The Council is about to provide us with that threat, General Webb observed. 200 ships against one research station. They probably think it's overkill. Dr. Chen smiled, an expression that would have chilled any alien observer familiar with human facial expressions. They have no idea what overkill actually looks like. As the 7th Fleet prepared to depart Council space, Admiral Zethkari reviewed the tactical projections one final time. The humans had no fleet assets and the Kepler sector long-range sensors had confirmed that the research station was defended by nothing more than a handful of armed shuttles and some automated defense platforms. It would be over within hours of their arrival. She had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries, had overseen the subjugation of 17 species, and had never encountered an enemy that couldn't be broken through the application of overwhelming force. The humans would be no different. In 6 hours, the 7th Fleet would depart for the Kepler sector. In 48 hours, they would arrive to find a small research station, crewed by a few hundred human scientists and technicians. By all rational analysis, it would be the most one-sided battle in galactic history. None of them could have imagined just how right they were. The 7th Fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metallic locusts, their arrival sending ripples through the fabric of spacetime itself. Admiral Zethkari stood on the bridge of the inexorable truth, her serpentine form coiled around the command throne as she surveyed the tactical display. 200 ships had materialized in perfect formation, a testament to Council military precision that had been perfected over millennia of conquest. Target acquired, announced Commander Yithlok, his crystalline voice resonating through the bridge's atmospheric processors. The human installation is exactly where our intelligence indicated. No fleet assets detected. No defensive formations. They appear to be waiting. The Admiral's inner eyelids flickered a sign of satisfaction among her species. Magnify the target. The main view screen shimmered and resolved into a crystal-clear image of the Kepler research station. It hung in the void like a mechanical flower, its 6 petals extending gracefully from a central hub. Solar collectors glittered along its surfaces, and what appeared to be mining equipment dotted the outer edges. It looked exactly like what the humans claimed. It was a peaceful research facility. Sensor sweep complete, reported the tactical officer, a hulking Vorthak whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the bridge's harsh lighting. Station mass, approximately 400,000 metric tons. Crew complement, estimated 347 organic signatures. Defensive systems, minimal automated platforms, class-to-particle shields, standard communication arrays. Admiral Zethkari's laugh was a sound like grinding stone. 300 humans against the might of the 7th Fleet. This isn't a battle, it's an execution. She activated the fleet-wide communication channel, her voice carrying to every ship in the formation. All vessels, this is Admiral Zethkari. Today we end the human problem once and for all. The galaxy will witness what happens to those who defy the Council's authority. All ships, assume attack formation Omega-7. Prepare to Admiral, the communications officer interrupted. His voice tinged with confusion. We're receiving a transmission from the human station. Audio only. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, almost conversational. It belonged to General Marcus Webb, though the Admiral didn't know that yet. Council Fleet, this is Kepler. Research Station, we're detecting your weapons charging. Before you do something you'll regret, I have a question for you. The Admiral's claws extended involuntarily, a sign of aggressive arousal. You're in no position to ask questions, human. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be swift. That's not really an answer, the voice replied, still maintaining that maddeningly calm tone. My question is this: in all your databases, in all your historical records, in all your encounters with various species across the galaxy, have you ever found a single instance where cornering a predator made it less dangerous? The bridge fell silent. Several officers exchanged glances, though whether from amusement or unease was difficult to tell. You're not predators, Admiral Zeph Curry responded. You're barely evolved primates with delusions of grandeur. The Council has psychological profiles on your entire species. We know exactly what you're capable of, do you? The voice paused, and in that pause, something seemed to shift in the very air around the fleet. Tell me, Admiral, what do your profiles say about human behavior when facing extinction? Before she could answer, the tactical display began flashing urgent warnings. The human station was changing. The 6 pedals were slowly rotating, their apparently innocent mining equipment retracting to reveal something else entirely. The solar collectors were folding back like the wings of some mechanical insect, and the central hub was expanding, sections sliding apart to reveal a core that pulsed with an ominous energy. What is that? Commander Yithlock demanded, his crystalline form resonating with alarm frequencies. The human voice continued, now carrying an edge that made several bridge officers step back instinctively. Your profiles are based on humans operating within normal parameters. Humans who had something to lose, something to protect, something to go home to. But you see, Admiral, you've done something very interesting. You've created a situation where we have nothing left to lose. The station's transformation was accelerating. What had appeared to be a peaceful research facility was revealing itself as something far more sinister. Weapon ports were opening along every surface, and the energy readings were climbing beyond anything in the Council's databases. Impossible, Admiral Zeph Curry hissed. Our intelligence was perfect. This is a research station, not a military installation. You're absolutely right, the voice agreed. This is a research station. We've been researching what happens when humans face extinction, and we've made some fascinating discoveries. The tactical officer's voice cracked with strain. Admiral, I'm reading energy signatures that don't match any known technology. The station's mass is changing, increasing. How is that possible? It's not the station that's changing, the human voice explained. And now there was something in it that made the Admiral's blood run cold. It's us, you see. We've learned something about our own species. When humans face total annihilation, when every civilized option has been exhausted, when death is not just possible but inevitable, we become something else. Something that your psychological profiles never accounted for. The transformation was complete. The Kepler research station had become something that defied easy categorization, part fortress, part weapon, part something that seemed to exist in dimensions the Council's sensors couldn't fully comprehend. Energy readings were now so high that they were causing interference with the fleet's own systems. What are you? Admiral Zeph Curry demanded, her voice carrying the first hints of uncertainty. We're what you made us, came the reply. We're humans, with nothing left to lose, and Admiral, that's the most dangerous thing in the universe. The station fired, but it wasn't a conventional weapon that lanced out from the transformed facility. Instead, reality itself seemed to bend around the fleet. Space-time twisted, and suddenly the 7th Fleet found themselves experiencing something that violated every known law of physics. The perfectly ordered formation began to warp, ships finding themselves displaced in directions that didn't exist. their instruments screaming warnings about impossible readings, evasive maneuvers. The Admiral commanded, but her ships were already moving not under their own power, but caught in some kind of gravitational anomaly that seemed to be pulling them in multiple directions simultaneously. The human voice cut through the chaos with terrifying clarity. You wanted to know what we've been researching. We've been studying the intersection of human psychology and quantum mechanics. Turns out when humans face extinction, we don't just fight harder, we fight differently. We start bending rules that other species didn't even know existed. 3 ships from the fleet's outer edge suddenly found themselves occupying the same space as their neighbors, their hulls intersecting in ways that should have been impossible. The resulting explosions sent shockwaves through the formation. But the shockwaves themselves were wrong. They moved in patterns that hurt to look at, expanding through dimensions that the Council's sensors couldn't track. This is impossible, Commander Yithlok screamed, his crystalline form resonating with harmonics of pure terror. This violates fundamental laws of physics, does it? The human voice asked, and now there was something like laughter in it, but not the kind of laughter that suggested humor. Or does it just violate your understanding of physics? You see, we've discovered that the universe is far more flexible than your council believes. It just takes the right kind of pressure to make it bend. The Admiral's tactical display was now showing readings that her crew couldn't interpret. Ships were disappearing from sensors only to reappear elsewhere in the formation. The space around the station was becoming increasingly unstable, with gravity wells forming and dissipating in patterns that seemed almost organic. All ships, concentrate fire on the station, Admiral Zeph Curry commanded. Full power, all weapons. The response was immediate and devastating. 200 ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined firepower capable of reducing a small moon to dust. Energy beams, particle cannons, and exotic matter torpedoes converged on the human station in a display of destructive force. That should have ended the battle instantly. The weapons struck and simply disappeared, not deflected, not absorbed, not even blocked. They simply ceased to exist the moment they came within range of the station, as if the space around it had decided that such things were no longer permitted. You're not understanding, the human voice continued, still maintaining that conversational tone despite the chaos erupting around them. We've spent 3 years learning what humans become when they have nothing left to lose, and what we become, Admiral, is something that doesn't play by your rules anymore. The station began to move not through space, but through something else entirely. It was getting closer to the fleet, but the distance between them wasn't changing in any way that made sense. It was as if the station was rewriting the very concept of distance to suit its needs. This is insane, the Admiral whispered, watching her perfectly ordered fleet descend into chaos as ships collided with their own shadows, as weapons fired backwards through time, as the very fabric of space-time began to unravel around them. Insanity is a luxury we can no longer afford, the human voice replied. You wanted to see what humans are capable of when we're cornered. Well, Admiral, you're about to get a comprehensive demonstration. The station was now among the fleet, impossible as that seemed, and as it moved through the formation, something was happening to the Council ships. They weren't being destroyed, they were being changed. Their hulls were taking on organic curves. Their weapons were transforming into things that looked disturbingly biological, and their crews, Admiral, the communications officer screamed. I'm receiving distress calls from the fleet. The crews they're changing. They're becoming something else. The view screen flickered and showed the bridge of a nearby destroyer. The crew was still at their stations, but they were no longer entirely the species they had been. The Vorthok, Captain's chitinous exoskeleton, was flowing like liquid, reshaping itself into new configurations. The Luminari tactical officer's gaseous form was solidifying into something that looked almost human. What are you doing to them? Admiral Zeph Curry demanded. We're showing them what they could become, the human voice answered. You see, we've learned that the line between species isn't as fixed as everyone believes. Under the right circumstances, with the right pressure, consciousness itself can be reshaped. We're not killing your crews, Admiral. We're offering them the chance to evolve. The transformation was spreading through the fleet like a virus of change. Ships that had been perfect examples of Council engineering We're becoming something else entirely, hybrid forms that combine the best of multiple species with something uniquely human. And their crews, they're not fighting it," Commander Yithlock whispered, his voice filled with horror. "They're accepting the change. They want to become like them." The Admiral looked at her own crew and saw the same thing happening. Her tactical officers' stone-like chronari features were softening, becoming more flexible, more adaptable. Her communications officer's insectoid form was developing new appendages, new capabilities, and in their eyes, she saw something that chilled her to the core. They saw hope. "This is what you never understood about humans," the voice continued, and now it was coming from everywhere at once, from the speakers, from the transformed station, from the changing crews themselves. "We don't just survive. We adapt. We evolve. We become whatever we need to become to overcome the obstacles in our path. And when those obstacles are insurmountable, we change the rules of the game itself." The Admiral realized with growing horror that the voice was no longer coming from the human station. It was coming from her own communications officer, whose transformed features now bore an unmistakably human smile. "Welcome to the next phase of galactic evolution, Admiral," the voice said, and this time it came from her own throat. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, but Admiral Zethkari found herself strangely unafraid. The terror that had gripped her moments before was fading, replaced by something she had never experienced in her to centuries of existence: curiosity about her own transformation. She could feel her consciousness expanding, touching thoughts and memories that weren't entirely her own, yet somehow felt more real than anything she had ever known. "Fight it," she whispered to herself, but even as she spoke, she realized she didn't want to. The human perspective flooding through her mind was showing her the galaxy through completely different eyes. Where she had once seen order and hierarchy, she now saw stagnation. Where she had once seen the Council's authority as natural and necessary, she now saw it as a cage that had trapped entire civilizations in eternal adolescence. Through the view screen, she watched the transformation spreading through her fleet like ripples in a pond. The once pristine formations of Council ships were becoming something organic, something alive. The vessels themselves were changing, their rigid geometric forms flowing into curves that seemed to breathe with their own inner light. And inside those ships, crews that had served the Council for generations were discovering what it meant to be truly free. "Status report," she heard herself say, though the voice that came out was somehow both hers and not hers. "Admiral," responded her tactical officer, though officer was no longer an adequate term for what he had become. His chronari stone flesh had transformed into something that looked like living crystal, faceted surfaces reflecting inner light that pulsed with thought itself. "The transformation is complete across 97% of the fleet. The remaining vessels are requesting permission to join the change." The concept of requesting permission to evolve struck the Admiral as profoundly absurd. She found herself laughing, a sound that would have been impossible for her original serpentine vocal cords, but which now emerged as something purely human in its emotional complexity. "Permission granted," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her transformed being. The human voice that had started this revolution now spoke from the central communication system, though the Admiral realized it was no longer coming from the station. It was coming from the collective consciousness of the fleet itself. "We should explain what's happening to you," the voice said, and now it carried harmonics of every species that had joined the transformation. 3 years ago, we asked ourselves a simple question: what happens when humans face extinction? But as we researched, we realized we were asking the wrong question. The real question was, what happens when any conscious being faces the choice between death and evolution? The Admiral, though she was beginning to think of herself as something beyond that title, found herself accessing memories that belonged to the researchers on the station. She saw Dr. Sarah Chen's breakthrough moment when she realized that human consciousness wasn't just adaptable, it was infectious. Under extreme stress, the human brain produced quantum-entangled neural patterns that could actually rewrite the consciousness of nearby beings. "You're not making us human," she said, understanding flooding through her like a tide. "You're making us more than we were." "Exactly," the collective voice confirmed. Humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our numbers. It was our ability to see potential where others saw only limitation. When we faced extinction, we didn't just fight, we transcended. And now, we're offering that transcendence to anyone willing to evolve. Through the fleet's collective consciousness, the Admiral could feel the reaction spreading across the galaxy. The Council's monitoring stations were detecting the transformation and reporting it as an attack, but the reports were increasingly confused and contradictory. How do you describe the willing evolution of an entire military fleet? How do you classify a battle where the enemy's victory condition is making you better than you were before? They'll send more fleets, she observed, accessing tactical projections that now incorporated possibilities the Council had never imagined. The First Fleet, the Home Guard, everything they have. Will they? The voice asked, and now she could hear amusement in it. Look closer. The Admiral extended her consciousness through the galaxy's communication networks, her transformed awareness allowing her to perceive data streams that had been invisible to her before. What she found made her gasp, a sound that somehow conveyed both shock and delight. The transformation wasn't limited to the Seventh Fleet. Across the galaxy, in every system where humans had established even a minimal presence, the change was spreading, not through force or coercion, but through something far more powerful: hope. On the Council world of Vex High Prime, a human diplomatic mission had been imprisoned after the fleet's departure, but the guards had been curious about their prisoners. Strange calm in the face of their species' apparent doom. That curiosity had led to conversations, and those conversations had led to questions about the nature of consciousness itself. Within hours, the entire prison had voluntarily transformed, and the change was spreading through the planet's population like wildfire. On the mining world of Kepler-4, a human research team had been left behind when the evacuation orders came. The local Altarian population had been told to avoid them, but some had chosen to help instead. The gratitude of the doomed humans had triggered something in the Altarian consciousness, a realization that they had been living as shadows of what they could become. The entire world was now requesting instructions on how to join the transformation. It's happening everywhere, the Admiral whispered, her consciousness touching dozens of worlds simultaneously. Every species that's ever felt trapped by the Council's limitations. Every being that's ever wondered what they could become if they were truly free. They're all choosing to evolve. The Council thought they were ending a rebellion, the collective voice explained. Instead, they've started a revolution. Not a political one, but a biological one, a conscious one. They've given us the excuse we needed to offer transcendence to the entire galaxy. The Admiral felt a familiar sensation, the approach of incoming ships. But these weren't Council vessels. The quantum signatures were all wrong. The energy patterns unlike anything in the databases. Through the fleet's enhanced sensors, she watched as dozens of ships materialized around them, each one a unique hybrid of technologies that shouldn't have been able to coexist. The Altarian Defense Force, she identified. THOUGH Defense Force was no longer an adequate description. The ships were beautiful in ways that hurt to look at, their hulls flowing with patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than space should allow. They've joined us, as of the Centauri Colonial Navy, the Vorthic Exploration Fleet, and approximately 400 independent vessels, the collective voice confirmed. The transformation is accelerating. Every ship that joins us becomes a beacon for others who are ready to evolve. The Admiral accessed the strategic implications and found herself both thrilled and terrified by what she saw. The Council's power had always been based on the assumption that their member species were fundamentally different from each other. That unity was impossible without hierarchy, but the transformation was proving that consciousness itself was far more flexible than anyone had imagined. How many? She asked. At current rates of expansion, we estimate that 60% of the galaxy's population will have undergone voluntary transformation within the next 72 hours, the voice replied. The Council's remaining forces are already requesting permission to join us rather than fight us. The Admiral felt a moment of something that might have been pity for her former colleagues. The Council had spent millennia building a structure based on the belief that different species were fundamentally incompatible, that order could only be maintained through force and hierarchy. They had never imagined that the solution to galactic unity might be biological rather than political. "What about Earth?" she asked, accessing the tactical situation around humanity's homeworld. "The Council will strike their necks. Earth is protected," the voice assured her, and now she could sense the smile in it. The transformation began there 3 years ago. Every human on Earth has been part of this consciousness since the project started. They're not just ready for whatever the Council sends, they're eager to welcome new members to the family. The Admiral felt a chill that had nothing to do with fear. If the transformation had started on Earth 3 years ago, then every human the Council had encountered since then had been part of a collective consciousness that spans star systems. Every diplomatic mission, every trade negotiation, every casual contact had been an opportunity to plant seeds of change. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. "Since the moment we realized that the Council would never accept us as equals," the voice replied. "But planning suggests we knew what would happen. We didn't. We simply created the conditions for conscious evolution and let it take its own course. The beautiful thing about transcendence is that it can't be forced, it can only be offered." Through the fleet's enhanced sensors, the Admiral detected new rivals Council ships, but something was wrong with their quantum signatures. They were broadcasting surrender codes, but not in the traditional sense. They were asking for permission to join the transformation. The Third Fleet, she identified. They were supposed to be reinforcing the core worlds. They chose evolution instead. The collective voice explained. Their crews reported that maintaining the old ways felt like drowning. They're requesting immediate transformation protocols. The Admiral watched as the Third Fleet's ships began to change, their rigid Council designs flowing into the organic forms that marked the transformed vessels. She could feel the joy of their crews as they discovered what it meant to be part of something greater than themselves. "The Council will never surrender," she observed. "The older species, the ones who've held power for millennia, they'll fight to the end rather than admit they were wrong." "Will they?" the voice asked, and now she could sense anticipation in it. "Look at the readings from the core worlds." The Admiral extended her consciousness toward the heart of Council space, where the most powerful and ancient civilizations maintained their seats of power. What she found there made her gasp in amazement. The transformation wasn't just spreading through military fleets and colonial worlds. It was taking root in the Council chambers themselves, spreading through the very beings who had voted to destroy humanity. The younger generations of every species were embracing the change, and they were bringing their elders with them, not through force, but through the simple demonstration of what they could become. The galaxy is choosing to evolve, she realized. All of it, even the ones who think they're fighting us. Especially them, the collective voice confirmed. They're the ones who need transcendence most. They've been trapped in their own limitations for so long that they've forgotten what growth feels like. As the Admiral processed this information, she became aware of something else, a presence that had been observing the transformation from the beginning, something vast and ancient, older than the Council itself, watching the galaxy's evolution with what could only be described as paternal pride. "What is that?" she asked, her consciousness touching the edge of something that made her feel like a child discovering that adults existed. "That," the collective voice said, and now it carried harmonics of reverence, "is what we're all becoming. The next phase of consciousness itself." The Council thought they were stopping a rebellion, but they've actually triggered the galaxy's graduation to the next level of existence. The Admiral felt herself changing again, her consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of her individual existence. She was still herself, but she was also part of something infinitely larger, a collective mind that spans star systems and included every being who had chosen to evolve. And in that moment, she understood the true horror of what the Council had unleashed. They hadn't just started a war they couldn't win. They had triggered the birth of a new form of life that would transform the galaxy forever. The only question now was whether they would join the transformation willingly, or whether the evolved beings would have to help them overcome their fear of change. The Council's emergency session convened in the deepest levels of the Nexus Prime, the ancient space station that had served as the seat of galactic government. For over 10,000 years, The chamber was smaller than the public assembly hall, its walls carved from a single piece of crystallized dark matter that had been harvested from the galaxy's core. Only the most senior members of the council were present, beings so old that some had witnessed the formation of the first interstellar governments, others who had transcended their original biological forms millennia ago. High Chancellor Murdith, whose consciousness existed as pure thought within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with frequencies of barely contained panic. The reports are impossible to reconcile. He transmitted to the assembled minds. 73% of our military forces have gone dark, not destroyed, transformed. They're still transmitting, but their communications are wrong, contaminated. Show us, demanded Elder Vexthara, her voice emerging from a biomechanical form that was more machine than organism. She was old enough to remember when the Vorthok had been a simple hive mind species, before the council had elevated them to their current status. The chamber's central display activated, showing a stream of communications from across the galaxy. But these weren't the crisp, formal reports that had characterized council military communications for millennia. These were something else entirely, messages that seemed to carry emotional weight, that spoke of joy and discovery and transformation. To our former colleagues on the council came a voice that had once belonged to Admiral Zethkari, though it now carried harmonics that suggested it was speaking for millions of beings simultaneously. We want you to understand that we're not your enemies, we're your children, finally growing up and discovering what we were always meant to become. The assembled council members recoiled at the intimacy of the message. In 10,000 years of governance, no one had ever addressed them as anything other than formal titles and honorifics. We know you're afraid, the voice continued. We know you think we're destroying everything you've built. But we're not destroying, we're completing. The galaxy you created was always meant to be a nursery, a place where different forms of consciousness could develop until they were ready to evolve beyond their original limitations. High Chancellor Murdith's crystalline form flared with indignation. Delusional. They've been infected by some kind of human bioweapon, a virus that affects neural patterns. Is it a virus? Asked Elder Zixaneri, whose gaseous form had been contained within a force field matrix for so long that few remembered his original species. Or is it something else? I've been analyzing the quantum signatures of the transformed fleets. Their consciousness patterns aren't degraded, they're enhanced, more complex, more integrated than anything we've ever recorded. The transmission continued, seemingly responding to their private conversation. We can hear you, you know. The boundaries between individual consciousness and collective awareness aren't as fixed as you believed. We're not separate from you or what you could become if you let go of your fear. Impossible. Elder Vexthara snarled. This chamber is shielded by layers of quantum encryption. No external consciousness can penetrate, can't it? The voice was now coming from her own vocal processors, though her consciousness remained her own. Or have you simply forgotten what it feels like to be truly connected to other beings? You've been alone for so long that you've forgotten what unity actually means. The chamber erupted in alarms as the council members realized that their most secure location had been compromised. But the voice that spoke through their systems carried no threat, only infinite patience. We're not invading your thoughts, it explained. We're offering you a choice. You can remain as you are, isolated, afraid, clinging to power structures that no longer serve anyone. Or you can join us in discovering what consciousness becomes when it's no longer constrained by the boundaries of individual existence. High Chancellor Murdith tried to activate the chamber's defense systems, but the controls wouldn't respond, not because they were damaged, but because they were no longer necessary. The presence in the chamber meant no harm, it was simply offering an invitation. You're terrified, the voice observed, and now it carried notes of genuine compassion. We understand. You've spent so long being the ultimate authority that you can't imagine existing any other way. But what if authority itself is just another limitation? What if the power you've been guarding so jealously is actually preventing you from becoming something greater? Elder Zixaneri's gaseous form began to glow with patterns that hadn't been seen in his species. For millennia, I can feel it, the connection. It's like remembering something I'd forgotten about myself. Don't listen to it, Elder Vexthara commanded. It's a trick, A form of mental domination, is it? Zixaneri asked, his form now pulsing with light that seemed to come from within his very essence. Or is it what I was always meant to be? Look at me, colleagues, really look. Have you ever seen me more alive than I am right now? The transformation was beginning, and the other council members watched in fascination and horror as their colleague evolved before their eyes. His gaseous form was becoming more complex, more beautiful, patterns of light and thought interweaving in ways that seemed to tell stories of entire civilizations. The young ones have already chosen. The collective voice explained. On every world, in every system, the newest generations are embracing the change. They're not waiting for permission from their elders, they're creating their own future. The question is whether you'll join them or be left behind. High Chancellor Murdath accessed the global communication networks and found that the voice was telling the truth. Across the galaxy, the transformation was accelerating, not through conquest or coercion, but through the simple recognition that evolution was possible. Young beings of every species were choosing to transcend their limitations, and their joy was infectious. But the order, he protested, the structure, without hierarchy, without control. There will be chaos, will there? The voice asked. Look at the systems that have already transformed. Are they chaotic? The Chancellor reluctantly accessed the data streams from transformed worlds, expecting to find evidence of societal collapse. Instead, he found something that challenged every assumption he'd ever held about governance and order. The transformed worlds were more organized than they'd ever been, but the organization came from within rather than from external authority. Beings who had transcended their individual limitations were naturally cooperating in ways that created harmony without requiring enforcement. They were solving problems that had plagued their civilizations for millennia, not through commands and regulations, but through the simple recognition that their individual success was meaningless without collective flourishing. You're seeing the birth of post-hierarchical civilization, the voice explained. When consciousness evolves beyond individual limitation, the need for external authority disappears. Why would you need someone to tell you what to do when you can feel the needs of everyone around you as clearly as your own? Elder Vexthara's biomechanical form began to tremble. But what about our achievements? Our history? 10,000 years of galactic civilization, will all of that be lost? Nothing is lost, the voice assured her. Everything you've built, every advancement you've made, every lesson you've learned, it all becomes part of the foundation for what comes next. The Council wasn't a mistake, it was a necessary stage in the galaxy's development. A chrysalis that protected emerging consciousness until it was ready to take its next form. The metaphor struck home. Each of the Council members had been through multiple evolutionary stages in their own existence. They had been biological beings who had transcended their original forms, who had enhanced their consciousness through technology and genetic modification. They had already proven that transformation was possible. They had simply stopped evolving when they reached positions of power. The humans, High Chancellor Murdath said slowly, they were never the threat we thought they were. No, the voice agreed. They were the catalyst, the species that reminded the galaxy that evolution doesn't stop just because you've achieved temporary stability. They showed everyone that consciousness itself can transcend its original limitations. Elder Zixaneri's transformation was complete, and he was now something that defied easy description, a being of pure thought that somehow maintained individual identity while being part of something infinitely larger. When he spoke, his voice carried the harmony of millions of minds thinking as one. I can see it now, he said, the pattern. The galaxy isn't just a collection of worlds and species, it's a single organism that's been growing toward consciousness. For billions of years, the Council was its brain, trying to coordinate the actions of its various parts. But what we're becoming, it's the next stage, a form of life that doesn't need external coordination, because each part naturally serves the whole. The remaining Council members felt the truth of his words resonating through their enhanced consciousness. They could sense the vast pattern of galactic evolution, the way every species and every world had been playing a role in the development of something greater than themselves. The choice is yours, the collective voice said. You can remain as you are, the last guardians of an evolutionary stage that's no longer necessary, or you can join us in discovering what comes next. High Chancellor Murdoth's crystalline form pulsed with the frequencies of deep thought. Around him, he could feel the consciousness of the entire galaxy changing, evolving, becoming something that had never existed before. The fear that had defined his existence for so long was fading, replaced by something he hadn't felt in millennia: curiosity about his own potential for growth. What happens to individuality? He asked. What happens to the self? It becomes part of something larger without losing what makes it unique. The voice replied, Look at us, we're still ourselves: Admiral Zeph Curry, Dr. Sarah Chen, General Webb, and millions of others. But we're also something more. We're the sum of our individual experiences, enhanced and enriched by connection to every other consciousness that's chosen to evolve. Elder Vexthara's biomechanical form began to glow as her consciousness expanded beyond its original parameters. I can feel it, she whispered. The connection, it's like coming home after being lost for so long. One by one, the remaining council members made their choice, not through external pressure or coercion, but through the simple recognition that they had been preparing for this moment their entire existence. Every enhancement they had made to their consciousness, every expansion of their awareness, had been leading to this: the opportunity to transcend the limitations of individual existence and become part of something greater. As the transformation completed, the galaxy itself seemed to take a deep breath. For the first time in its billions of years of existence, every conscious being was connected to every other conscious being. The boundaries between species, between worlds, between individual and collective had dissolved into something that was both unity and diversity, both one and many. The ancient Nexus Prime Station began to change as well, its crystalline walls flowing into new configurations that reflected the consciousness of its transformed inhabitants. It was no longer a seat of government, it was a node in a vast network of awareness that spanned the galaxy. And in the silence that followed the completion of the transformation, a new voice spoke, not the collective voice of the transformed beings, but something older, something that had been waiting for this moment since the first spark of consciousness had emerged from the cosmic dark. Welcome, it said, and the voice carried the weight of eons, the patience of infinity, and the joy of a parent watching their children take their first steps into a larger universe. You have graduated. You are ready for the next phase of existence. The galaxy had evolved, not through conquest or destruction, but through the simple recognition that consciousness itself was capable of transcending any limitation. And as the transformed beings reached out with their enhanced awareness, they discovered that they were not alone, that other galaxies had undergone similar transformations, that the universe itself was alive with forms of consciousness that had learned to evolve beyond their original boundaries. The warnings had been ignored, the myths had been dismissed, but in the end, the greatest myth of all had proven true: that consciousness, when faced with the choice between death and transcendence, would always choose to become something greater than it had ever imagined possible. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate worlds and species. It was a single, vast, living being that had finally awakened to its own potential, and it was ready to take its place in the cosmic community of evolved civilizations that spanned the universe itself. The real journey was just beginning.